My name is BJ Kohlstedt, and this presentation is going to give a short introduction to U.S. National Grid, but mostly focuses on how 911 dispatchers and other emergency responders can respond more quickly to the more than 30% of 911 callers who cannot give us an address. So this presentation is designed not for GIS professionals, but for those who are going to respond and might not have a deep understanding or even an awareness of National Grid or GIS mapping. I come from Lake County, Minnesota, which is 3,000 square miles of woods and water, and I spent about 18 years on the Sheriff's Rescue Squad and 12 years as the Lake County Emergency Management Director. When you look at Lake County's huge areas of remote and wilderness land and water, we needed a way to better identify and communicate location when there was no address. This is a typical example that happens everywhere, where someone calls in on a 911 call and they cannot tell you where they are. So this person I was talking to on his cell phone, and he explained that he was somewhere between Teddy State Park and Canada, which is a distance of about 90 miles. So I was explaining to him that we need a little bit more information to try to narrow it down. We worked with several jurisdictions in our county and in our region to try to come up with options, and we learned quickly that there is already a U.S. national standard geo format for land-based search and rescue. And it is not lat long. The reason it's not lat long is because latitude, longitude lines are based on the curve of the Earth. They're curved lines. And it's hard for our human brains to work with and understand how to go from one place to another using the curved lines of a globe. So grids work better if you're working in an area which is small enough that you can represent it on a flat map, like the state of Minnesota. Some people are nervous about working with what they think of as a new system, like a grid, but we've actually been using grids since we were in elementary school, where we learned, they called them graphs, and we learned to count so many units to the right and then so many units up to locate a certain point on the graph or on a map. With US National Grid, those units counting to the right and up are kilometers, and on a map, they're counting to the east and then to the north to find a certain location. Basically, the U.S. National Grid divides the country and the world into grid zone designations. You can see from this map, for example, that most of Minnesota, Iowa, and part of Wisconsin is in the grid zone 15T. Those grid zones are further divided then into grid squares of 100 kilometers. 100 kilometers is about 62 miles on a side, and the county where I live in northeastern Minnesota is mostly located in the grid square of 15TXN. And then we can make smaller maps from those as well, like 10-kilometer maps on a side. When we make maps using US National Grid, we should always put the kilometer grid lines across the map, top and bottom and side to side, and also put the kilometer numbers on the edge of the map or the grid collar, so that whoever's using the maps can have an idea of how to describe where they are. Another way we can help the public and others become familiar with US National Grid is to use emergency location markers, or ELMs, which have been designed to give a location within 10 meters or 30 feet of where the sign is posted. In 2011, we started posting as the first in the nation to post these ELMs, or emergency location markers, on snowmobile trails, ski trails, state parks, etc., across the remote and wilderness areas of Lake County. They are now in about 5,000 areas or 5,000 ELMs across the nation. And I want to point out that they are not just useful in remote and wilderness areas, but also in urban areas where there might be large areas that don't have street addresses, like large parks, even parking lots, industrial complexes, and large waterways. I know, for example, they've already saved several lives along the Mississippi River, where it's difficult to give an exact location when someone calls 911. This is an area in Bayfield County, Wisconsin. We were talking with the sheriff's office there and trying to train their dispatchers how to incorporate the ELMs, or emergency location markers, into their emergency response. So in Bayfield County, Wisconsin, you can see from the map that most of the county is in the grid zone of 15TXM. And because the entire county is within that grid zone, we really don't have to use those grid zone designators when they're talking about coordinates. We can just use the kilometer coordinates in the white box at the bottom of the sign. It's helpful for both responders and the public to understand the scale of the numbers on those coordinate signs. So the first number, 6110, is reading 61.10 kilometers east from the zero marker of the graph or grid. And the bottom number, 7148, is measuring kilometers or tenths of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers, north. The first two numbers, 61 and 71, are kilometers. So if I'm walking in the woods and looking at a GPS and the top number changes from 6110 to 6111, I have walked 1/100th of a kilometer or 10 meters, or that's about 10 yards east, and I've made a first down on a football field. If my number changes from 7148 to 7158, it means I'm walking north and I have gone 1/10 of a kilometer or 100 meters or about 100 yards, which is the same as a football field. So I've made a touchdown walking north. We also encourage people when they come upon a trailhead, if they're starting off on a ski trail, snowmobile trail, hiking trail, or whatever, to download a couple of tools on their cell phones to help them as they travel. One is to download the USNGapp.org website, which is a browser-based application that will put that blue sign on their phone, and the numbers will move with them as they walk. So that if they are injured or ill on the trail, but they are not right at the location of an ELM sign, they still know where they are and can give coordinates to the dispatchers. We also encourage them to download the Avenza map program, which is a free program, and they can then open maps that are locally created trail maps for each trail system on their Avenza maps. And that will not only show them a map, but also a dot that will travel on the map as they move. So they know not only their coordinates if they need to call 911, but also where they are on the map. And we can all learn more about US National Grid from the US National Grid Center.org website. Now we want to move on to how we train dispatchers and emergency responders to make use of this system, especially if a caller calls in and give them US National Grid coordinates. We encourage dispatchers to use Joseph L. Felt's application called GIS Surfer, which is a mapping system which uses US National Grid. And the dispatchers can go to this website, design the map to fit their own local area by zooming into their area, turning on the National Grid, selecting a base map, and then downloading that and bookmarking it so that every time they get a 911 call, the dispatcher can open that GIS Surfer website and it will appear as their own local map, using the base map that they have chosen and zoomed into their location. Every time they turn that on with a link, they can send it to all their other dispatchers and responders so that they will all open in the same way. This map is the one that opens for Bayfield County, Wisconsin. And if someone calls their dispatch center and gives their ELM coordinates in the field, for example, the dispatcher can go to menu, search, plug in the coordinates that he's given on the phone, hit search and mark, and it will zoom right into where the person is located on their map. They can see the coordinates. They can change the base map so that they can go to an aerial view and see exactly where they are and what block in town, what building they're at. They can zoom in more, and now they can email a link to this map by clicking on the menu. It looks like this, and then they can email that link to all their responders in the field so that the responders can open it on their phone and find out and see the same thing that the dispatchers are looking at. Responders in the field can also click on menu My Location, and it shows their location on their phone so they can see where they are related to where the person is that they're supposed to be responding to. Let's take an example of someone that's injured on the more than hundreds of miles of bike trails in Bayfield County, Wisconsin. If someone calls and gives a location from an emergency location marker or from their phone map that says I'm at 3431 1308, the dispatcher can put those numbers in, hit search and mark. They will find out the remote location where that person is located. They can then zoom in to see what kind of trails or roadways they can use to access that person. They can change the base map to an aerial view so that they can see, for example, a gravel pit nearby where they might be able to land a helicopter. And if the responders in the field do not have cell service, they might only have public radio service where they can get the coordinates, they can use their printed map books that show a book on the map with the same view of a topo map and an aerial view at the same time and same location, and can look up the grid coordinates and find out where the person is whom they need to help. What if the caller gives their location in a different format than US National Grid? You can see that all these formats mark the same spot, and any of these formats can still be put in by the dispatcher on GIS Surfer in the right format. And when they click search and mark, it will again show them exactly where the person is on the map. And a dispatcher can right click on any of those locations, and that will convert those coordinates to all the other formats that might be needed. For example, they might get it in US National Grid, but if they're requesting a helicopter for medical response, normally the helicopter's coordinates that they work in is decimal minutes. And so they can convert it to that so that they have their location as they need it in the right format. A lot of our dispatchers and responders are familiar with UTM, Universal Translocator, or Military Grid Reference System. And that, because they're all based on UTM or meters and kilometers, they are very easy to convert in our own heads easily from one to the other. For example, if you get a UTM coordinate, we know that you can just ignore the last right-hand digit of easting and northing, because that's a 1 meter precision, and then use the previous 4 digits of easting and northing, and you can get the USNG coordinates. Military Grid Reference System is very similar. Responders in the field do not have a dispatch console to work with, but they do usually have cell phones. And even if they don't have cell service, if they have downloaded a map, and they can use the map when they're out of service, and they still can get the USNG coordinates or whatever coordinate format they want, because those coordinates come from satellites, not from cell towers. So that's why it's important to download this information on your phone before you leave cell service. And with this website on their phone, they can do all the things that the dispatcher can do on their console. In other words, converting coordinates, finding them, seeing where they are and where they should go. Excuse me. We have printed guidelines for emergency responders that go through these same instructions. We encourage responders to also download the USNG app from the usngapp.org website so that they will see the same blue signs that people in the field are seeing. And also to download an Avenza app so that they can download maps that are locally created and then use them to add points and labels for their search. Another app that's helpful is Esri's My USNG, which gives similar coordinates and map locations. And finally, we do have handouts, as I mentioned, to help responders with their learning how to do this. So US National Grid does make a difference. It has made a difference already in helping people respond sooner and more efficiently to emergencies and to save lives as well. We're happy to take questions or to be contacted for future questions. Thank you.